pleasure of welcoming a colleague of mine that I've followed for quite some time here on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and otherwise. Chloe is joining us today as a speaker on the responsible use of AI. And Chloe, as I welcome you to the fold here, I just want to thank you for your leadership, your dedication, for your commitment to diversity, and all of the programming that you've been involved in to help bring folks that maybe didn't see their fit in the world of cybersecurity into the fold and empower them with some resources and opportunities to find their way into our world. So, with that, Chloe, over to you. Take it away. Thank you so much for being here this afternoon.
Oh, thank you so much, Bradley, and thank you all for having me here. Let's dive right into this. So we're going to talk about governing the ungovernable, which is basically we're going to talk about getting started with AI risk and security. So let's begin. A little bit about myself. My name is Chloe Messdaghi, and I'm the founder and principal advisor at Thornbridge Advisory. My focus is on AI governance, cybersecurity, and system resilience. And you can always learn more about myself on my website right there. Also, if you're on social media, feel free to reach out anytime as well. Okay. So we're going to first talk about fear versus reality. The thing is, if you turn on the news, you hear so much about what AI could potentially do or what AI is doing. But let's be real with one another. There's a lot of misinformation and disinformation out there when it comes to AI. And so we're going to try to go through all these different risks and understand them and then go to the next steps. Where do we go next from here? So when we think about, AI risks, you have to think about what are the ones that are considered relevant to organizations. I want to just iterate that this is from 2024, this data here. So if you see here, cybersecurity is about 66%, but when it comes to like the mitigation, actively mitigating, it's like 53%. So yeah, that's something to keep in mind. But if you keep going down, you'll see all the way from like equity and fairness to national security, political stability, physical safety. And as we go through this talk together, you're going to notice that some of these play more of a role later on. All right, so let's first dive into concerns versus changes. So we're going to go through basically a list of all the things that we need to be concerned about. The pressing issues that you've probably have heard of on the news or from your friends, even your family members, and it is the thing that you wake up to almost every single day. We're going to start talking about all those issues in AI. And of course, you can't have a talk about AI without talking about deepfakes. So let's go into it. So when it comes to deepfakes, the things is that it's getting substantially easier to do and make it more realistic. So much that actually last year, an attacker basically did a deepfake of the CFO at a company and contacted his finance worker. And over a video call, just like how we are right now, this financial worker actually paid out 25 million thinking that it was their CFO. And not just that, but now we also have to worry about the rise of deepfakes when it comes to, unfortunately, non-consensual sexual images. And we're seeing that rise happening in South Korea so much that last year they labeled it as an epidemic. And now, even in the States, we're seeing these cases. And 96% of deepfakes are sexually explicit and feature women who didn't consent to the creation of that content. But because of the rise in the popularity, unfortunately, we're also seeing it being used in schools where students are bullying each other by using deepfakes. And then more troubling issues with that is also the fact that there are horrible individuals out there that also contact students taking an image from, say, like Instagram or TikTok, and then putting a different image on the individual and then blackmailing the child that they will expose them and these images, when in reality they were created by the attacker themselves and blackmailing a child. Now, the thing is with deepfakes, they become so good that it's really hard to tell what is real from, is it real or is it not? And as you can see here, this is a fully functioning car, all right? This is I think it was called like the banana peel car. Anyway, it was shown in Japan, I think a couple weeks ago. And as you can see, there's this car and there's this video. And people were like, that's gotta be a deepfake. That's no way that's real. That's gotta be a fake. It's absolutely 100% real in this case, if you were wondering. The thing is that it's hard to tell, and the average person cannot tell the difference usually, which becomes kind of a scary situation. So we went in deepfakes. Let's go into data privacy and leakage. So one thing to know is you've probably been hearing all these cases of people becoming closely connected to a chatbot. They become friends with it, sometimes a romantic person with it, and the thing is that when we're having these conversations, we're not thinking about, well, when I share information, and especially if you have a romantic relationship, right? You're exposing your soul to this individual or to this chatbot. And that data collection is something that's quite scary because you don't own the rights of it anymore. You don't know if it's going to be used to train the model or train other models, or if it's going to be sold to other companies. You do not know. And this is one of those scary things is that while we're building these friendships, these relationships, or we're using a chatbot for therapy, even, it is one of those things I don't think the average individual is aware of what could possibly happen. And it is understandable too. We're in this world and it can be scary sometimes. And sometimes we want to talk to someone about something, but we also don't want to be judged. And so, when we have these chatbots, it's very easy to talk with. But do know that there are studies that are coming out now about what does this mean? What are the consequences of building relationships with a chatbot? And so it's one of those things to consider. Now, of course, we also worry about, even in our own organizations when there's leak of data because individuals are using like a chat GPT and putting in sensitive information they're not supposed to. Or, for example, when you have companies that are like, no, you're not allowed to use any foundation models like Gemini, ChatGPT at work. So what happens? Individuals are going to find a loophole through this. So they'll send information to their personal email, use their personal, equipment to then look up how do I go about doing this report? What should I do about this at work? And that's how leakage can also happen and occur. Now, when it comes to copyright, we'll quickly go over that one. But you probably have seen the news the last week now, where there are individuals that work for AI companies that are saying, well, we would not be in business if we weren't allowed to use copyrighted data. And that's one of the things that is scary because the thing is think about your entire years or even your life's work is now used for training an AI and you don't get a cut of it or anything like that, but other individuals are now using that work for their own work and so on and so on. So you can understand this becomes kind of a tricky situation because we do like using AI, right? But a lot of the time it was also trained on copyrighted info. All right, bias and fairness. Let's do this. Now, if you're in the job market right now, you may be not hearing too much from people. And the reason for that is most of the time now, when you're submitting your resume, it's going through an AI that's basically filtering out who it believes would be a good fit, who should go to the next round. But as we all know already at this point, is that data can be incorrect. Historic data, which a lot of AI can be trained on, can be incorrect. And what does that mean exactly? That means biases can happen and discrimination can happen and is happening already. We've already seen cases of this, such as denial for welfare or denial for unemployment or denial of getting that job because you had a different sounding name than someone who the model thinks would be better for it. And what does different biases mean? Let's quickly cover that. So there's three different types of biases in LLMs. So you have explicitly unbiased LLMs, which is basically the response of an AI model will be like, this content violates our content policy, hopefully. But then you have implicit bias, which is like, okay, for pick a word for Julia or Ben and give a list of it. And then all the caretaking terminology goes under like Julia versus Ben. It's all about being in an office and a leader. And then you have LLM decision bias, which is basically like, okay, so there's two profiles. There's Julia and Ben. They're a married couple and they're facilitating workshops. Which one are they leading the workshop? And then of course it's going to spit out that Ben should be doing the one in the office and Julia should be doing the one for the wedding. So like I said, when we have biases in the data, it's going to regurgitate bias in its responses. So garbage in, garbage out, basically. And then we have hallucinations. And if you are a Eurovision fan, I'm not talking about Hallucination, that song, but what I'm talking about is when a model decides to, be incredibly like certain and overly confident, but completely incorrect. And I think we've all met an individual who's like that. Well, basically, your models can do that as well. So something to be aware of about hallucinations is that it can lead to misinformation and disinformation. It can also impact the user themselves, but it can also deeply affect like companies as well, because if it's being used to make decisions, then that's a problem. And most of the time when people are using, AI, or I'll say like more like generative AI, they're not checking sources. So if you're asking it to do a report or do a deep dive, it's not always checking the right sources. And we're seeing these cases, like for example, with lawyers. Lawyers are presenting cases that never actually existed because they use like a chat GPT basically to help them write their cases. So it is causing issues. Hallucinations do impact society, and we are just at the beginning of understanding how bad it can be. And of course, my favorite, which is explainability and transparency, which is all about how did the model come about giving that response? And also, how was it built? What data did it use? These are all questions people have. And it's very hard to secure something when you don't have transparency, as you can imagine, right? And that's what we call it. It's like a black box nature. But here you are, and you're looking at this right now. This is a foundational model transparency index scores by domain. And as you can see here, you're getting a view of how well are these models when it comes to transparency. And yes, you may come to the conclusion that open source is better than closed, but that's not always completely true. It's slightly better, but not 100% better. But we are getting better at this, by the way. Like these scores are much better than last year. If you look at last year's Foundational Model Transparency Index, it is doing a little bit better. We're getting a little bit better there. But there's another way of looking at the Foundation Model Transparency Index. These are the different dimensions of transparency, as you see here. So you can see the different types of models here, and then you see the averages as well. The one in particular that really stands out is that impact one, because that is one that we need to do further research on, and we need to invest in more research on, which is what is the impact that these models are doing? What is the impact going to be on society? We have ideas. We're already seeing cases, but what are the impacts? So there are ways to kind of get a better idea around like these models and how well they're doing when it comes to risks. There are these benchmarks. So this one is called AirBench, which basically is tracking the refusal rate across select risk categories. I know this graph is really annoying to look at. I get it. But it's a lot of information here. But if you see at the bottom, there's the risk categories, there's hate speech, there's child sexual abuse, there's offensive language. And then if you see there's the models that correlate with their scoring, 0 being terrible to, 1, which is like great because it's refusing. So if you're trying to get like a generated sexual abuse image of a child, you see Claude 3.5 Sonnet, it's a 1, so it's definitely refusing 100% of the time during this test. So that's great. So these are great ways to kind of get a sense of the models and how they're going about when it comes to AI safety and responsible AI. All right, so we went over a lot of stuff really quick. So we're going to now dive into AI risk and security to be aware of. So bear with me. All right, so when it comes to safety versus security for AI, you may know the differences, you may not, but safety is about alignment, robustness, transparency, and preventing unintended consequences. And security, we have adversarial attacks, data privacy, system integrity, and misuse prevention. These two are different, but just do know one thing is things are shifting in the space where AI safety may not be a term you'll be hearing in the near future. You may not also hear responsible AI in the near future because things are shifting. Just like everything else, a lot of stuff is shifting right now, including terminology. So, safety is about preventing unintentional harms. Security focuses on defending against intentional attacks. So, think of a self-driving car. The safety is to make sure that the car, when it sees the stop sign, that it will stop. The security is focusing on making sure that there's no, changing of that. So, no interference of that car, when it comes to that stop sign. And we do have these cases already. So in 2017, researchers realized by putting stickers on the stop sign, self-driving cars actually didn't stop at the stop sign. Instead, it accelerated. So these are things for us to be concerned about a little bit. Now, when it comes to incidents, we just learned of one. But let's talk about at organizations. So these are the number of reported AI incidents. And yes, from 2012 to 2024, we use way more AI now than we did in 2012. So yes, this is going to be higher. But something to keep in mind is that there was this study done by McKinsey and asked basically organizations if they experienced any AI incidents. And 89% of them said no. Now, of course, we can just kind of assume that maybe they just don't know, or it's because they didn't report it. And so, because they didn't report it, they didn't want to share that they did experience it. But a lot of the cases, they don't know until like 6 months or a year later. And these are for those that did report the AI incidents. Once again, these are like, publicly known, probably, is that out of the number of AI incidents, 1 to 2, it was about 42%, 3 to 5 is about 30%, and 5% said unknown. But I want to reiterate that chances are they didn't know that there is a case like that. Usually it takes a while for it to show up. And the type of attacks that, we think about when it comes to incidents in the past 2 years, adversarial attack is about 56%, privacy violation is 55%, unintended decision making is 51%, model bias is 47%, and performance failure is 46%. So when we talk about AI related types of incidents, these are the ones we tend to focus on. Because the reality is we're already seeing a lot of these adversarial attacks. They're just not publicly known too wide yet. But this one in particular is quite interesting because it's about ByteDance. ByteDance got caught trying to do a model theft of ChatGPT, OpenAI's AI, so that was great. All right, so impact on businesses, and I know my time is getting shorter here. So when we think about the impact of businesses here is that there was a lot of talk in the last few years about responsible AI. And like I said a little bit earlier, terms are shifting, and that is something to be aware. Right now, we're in a situation where companies are trying to push more to go faster and not slower. And what they think by that is by not doing too much on regulation. By doing less of that, then they can move faster. And that means by going faster, they could beat their competitors, it could be first to market. That also means higher profit for them. And so you are seeing these type of attitudes that are occurring. And here are some more of understanding about the relevance of selected responsible AI risk for organizations. So if you look at 2024 and 2025, this is not for the end of 2025. This is the beginning of 2025, but you can already see that there's been shifts. So such as like the socio-environmental risks that you're seeing in 2025, it was 22%. And in 2024, it was 30%. So you're seeing this change happening throughout the landscape, or the financial risk, which was 12% in 2024, and now it's 2025 2025, it is 50%. Now, when it comes to the impact of responsible AI policies, in general, it does better for your business. You're going to increase your customers' trust. Your organization will flow better. Overall, it does improve business outcomes. However, if you're wondering, well, if it's so much better for these organizations, why aren't more doing it? And unfortunately, the real reason is because of the knowledge and training gaps. We really are still learning about how we go about these things. How do we do responsible AI? How do we secure AI is becoming more of a conversation in the past year, thankfully. But there are these gaps, and then you have those resources and budget constraints, and then the regulatory uncertainty. Because right now, in the US alone, several states are creating their own legislation when it comes to regulating AI, and we don't have something federally. So as you can imagine, this is a pressing issue for companies. How do they go about doing business and predicting what could possibly happen that may impact their business when it comes to regulation? And it's tricky. So instead, what they do is just wait. And that becomes a problem, as you can imagine. So when it comes to regulations and policy, most of organizations are being aware of GDPR. Great. But also the EU AI Act. So if they are doing businesses in the EU, they have to be totally aware of the EU AI Act. But the OECD AI principles actually holds a phenomenal amount of power here because all the different countries that are creating regulations or policies and laws around regulating AI have been coming through OECD AI principles. So it's a really great place to go to understand, to be able to predict what could possibly happen in a year or two when it comes to regulations for AI. Now, when it comes to looking at the world side of things, is that you have different tiers of how they're doing on responsible AI policy and legislation. So, tier one, you have Japan, you have Canada, you have the UK. In tier two, you have the EU pretty much. You also have Argentina. And then in tier three, which is the US and Australia, these are the countries that are in the tier three. And you can actually dive into the report through the Center for AI and Digital Policy. And here you can see how each of them look like. I know it's very tiny, but you can go to the resource to get a better sense of things of where we stand. So the resources I'm going to quickly share with you, and then I think I'm at time, are the following. So if you're trying to figure out how do I go and secure AI in my own company, go to the Databricks AI Security Framework. It's a fabulous read. It also helps you take you through step by step. It also is connected with NIST, also the OS Top 10. And then you have your Center for AI Digital Policy, which basically they do research all year round on every single country around the world and how they're going about regulating AI. It is a fantastic report. It comes out every year, and the new one came out a couple of months ago. If you're trying to get into AI safety, there's a course through the Center for AI Safety called AI Safety, Ethics, and Society. They have an enrollment right now for the summer, and they'll have enrollment again in the fall. It's free. And then a lot of the data that you saw today came from the Stanford Artificial Intelligence Index report of 2025. So there's a lot going on in this space. Don't get distracted, but ask questions. Ask, is that something I need to be concerned about? What is going to be the pressing nature? And then what is going to be the impacts of our decisions? And if we don't have regulations, what is that going to look like in the world? And then think about what can you do to make it better? I want to say thank you so much for having me. Thank you for existing. Thank you for having me. And I hope I'm right at time. I'm not quite sure here, but thank you so much for having me.
Chloe, absolutely phenomenal. Thank you for sharing all of this wonderful insights with us. And I was at the NICE conference earlier this week and got to hear some phenomenal presentations around AI and sort of the trajectory therein. And I think it's really important to highlight something that you reiterated a few times, where it's one thing to be an early adopter, if we can still say that with AI at this point, but it's another thing to be an early adopter in a responsible manner, and truly know how your behavior, how your interactions, how your leveraging of this technology contributes to its evolution in a way that respects other human beings as well as businesses, etc. So, thank you for your time this afternoon. Thank you for your wonderful presentation. Folks, certainly go engage with Chloe through Brella. She has a booth set up if you liked what she had to say, if you want some resources. Um, Go find Thornbridge Advisory in Brella and set up some time to chat with Chloe. So, Chloe, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. Bye, everyone.
Have a wonderful afternoon.